In the spring of 1983, along a sun-drenched, isolated stretch of the Cyprus coastline near Larnaca, a new tourist destination celebrated its grand opening. It was called the Azure Blue Village, a collection of modest but pristine whitewashed bungalows surrounding a central lodge, a sparkling swimming pool, and a professionally equipped diving center. It was marketed exclusively to German and Austrian tourists by a newly formed Swiss travel company, promising an unspoiled Mediterranean escape far from the crowded beaches of Aie and Napa. The manager, a charming and impeccably organized man in his late 30s known as Dieter Schmidt, personally greeted the first coach of arriving guests, his English accented with a flawless German inflection. He was the picture of European hospitality, and his small, dedicated team of staff, the cheerful diving instructor, the efficient receptionist, the quiet but capable maintenance man, all contributed to an atmosphere of serene professionalism. To the vacationing families and diving enthusiasts, the Azure Blue Village was a paradise, a legitimate and competently run business. This perception was a meticulously engineered fiction, the most critical component of an intelligence operation of breathtaking audacity, for the resort was a complete fabrication, owned and operated by the Israeli intelligence service, Mossad. Dieter Schmidt was not a German hotelier, and his office, located in a soundproofed room behind the linen storage closet, contained not booking ledgers and invoices, but a bank of state-of-the-art signals intelligence receivers, frequency analyzers, and high-speed decryption computers, all silently and relentlessly aimed at the scattered, desperate, and talkative remnants of the Palestine Liberation Organization's command structure. The strategic imperative for this elaborate deception had been forged in the crucible of the 1982 Lebanon War. The Israeli invasion, Operation Peace for Galilee, had succeeded in its primary military objective, the expulsion of Yasser Arafat and the PLO leadership from their long-held stronghold in Beirut. This was a tactical victory, but it created a new and far more complex strategic problem. The PLO, once a centralized and geographically contained entity, was now violently decentralized, its leadership apparatus scattered across the Arab world, with Arafat himself establishing a new headquarters in Tunis. The physical distance, stretching over 2,000 kilometers of sea and hostile or neutral airspace, shattered their established command and control networks. This did not, however, stop their operational planning. Instead, it forced them to adapt, creating a diffuse, redundant, and highly challenging communications system to coordinate a global campaign of terror. At the nexus of this new network was the island of Cyprus. Its geographical proximity to the Levant, its status as a major international banking and shipping hub, its robust telecommunications infrastructure, and its politically neutral to sympathetic stance made it the ideal logistical and communications relay point between the leadership in Tunis and the operational cells remaining in Lebanon, Syria, and across Europe. For Mossad, this presented a nightmare scenario. The target was no longer a building in West Beirut but an invisible web of electronic signals and human couriers crisscrossing a sovereign, friendly nation. Initial attempts to penetrate this new Cypriot hub using conventional methods yielded frustratingly limited results. Short-term surveillance teams, inserted to monitor specific individuals or locations, were effective for brief periods but were logistically burdensome and carried a high risk of exposure. The Cypriot security services, while not hostile, were competent and deeply sensitive to foreign intelligence operations on their soil, a legacy of the island's own complex history. A single compromised operation could create a diplomatic crisis that would shut down Israeli access entirely. Human intelligence recruitment was equally fraught with difficulty. The PLO cells operating in and through Cyprus were small, insular, and composed of hardened veterans of the Lebanese conflict, bound by deep-seated loyalty and paranoia. Penetrating these core groups with human assets was a long-term, high-risk endeavor with no guarantee of success. Furthermore, the sheer volume of communications was overwhelming. The PLO utilized a sophisticated and layered system. Urgent operational commands might be transmitted via encrypted high-frequency radio bursts from mobile transmitters, while logistical and financial information traveled through public telex services, and strategic directives were hand-carried by couriers posing as businessmen or tourists. Simply identifying the signal was not enough. Mossad needed to intercept, decrypt, analyze, and act upon the intelligence in near real time, a capability that was impossible to sustain with rotating teams or limited local assets. The agency was effectively blind and deaf at the most critical node of its enemy's nervous system, a failure that was underscored by a series of small-scale but successful PLO attacks in late 1982 and early 1983, attacks that intelligence postmortems revealed had been coordinated through Cyprus. The challenge, as defined by the head of Mossad's technological division and the commander of its operational unit, Caesarea, was not to find a better way to chase the signals, but to make the signals come to them. The PLO was using a mix of line-of-sight microwave transmissions across the water to safe houses in northern Lebanon, satellite uplinks, and standard high-frequency radio. These signals, while varied, all propagated through the air in predictable ways. What was needed was a fixed, powerful, and utterly invisible listening post, one that could operate continuously for years without arousing the slightest suspicion. The idea that emerged from a series of high-level strategic meetings was radical, expensive, and logistically staggering. Mossad would go into the tourism business. They would not simply rent a room or a villa, they would build and operate a complete, legitimate, revenue-generating holiday resort. The proposal was met with initial skepticism, bordering on disbelief. The financial cost alone was enormous, requiring the allocation of a significant portion of the agency's clandestine operations budget. The operational risks were equally daunting. The success of the entire mission would depend on the ability of a team of spies to flawlessly impersonate hoteliers, chefs, and diving instructors for an extended period. A single disgruntled tourist complaining to the Cypriot authorities about poor service, a slip of the tongue by an operative, or a routine health and safety inspection uncovering a hidden antenna cable could unravel the entire operation, leading to catastrophic political fallout and the imprisonment of the entire team. Despite the immense obstacles, the strategic logic was undeniable. A tourist village offered the perfect cover. Its coastal location would provide an unobstructed signal path towards Lebanon and the open sea, ideal for intercepting both marine and terrestrial transmissions. The daily churn of tourists, vehicles, and supply deliveries would create a curtain of normal activity that would mask the movements of operatives and the subtle installation of technical equipment. Most importantly, a successful business would be self-sustaining and would generate its own legitimate reason for existing, deflecting any official scrutiny. The plan, codenamed Operation Azure, was greenlit by the Prime Minister's office with the explicit understanding that it must be entirely self-contained and that in the event of compromise, the State of Israel would deny all knowledge. The mission was not merely to listen, but to create a permanent, invisible fortress of intelligence on the very doorstep of the enemy's new command hub. The operation would become a case study in the construction of a deep-cover logistical platform, requiring a fusion of tradecraft, technological innovation, and profound psychological resilience. It demanded a new breed of operative, one who could not only handle a weapon or a dead drop, but could also expertly fold a napkin, mix a cocktail, and calm a guest whose luggage had been lost by the airline. The technological preparation for Operation Azure was a masterwork of clandestine engineering, executed by the technical artisans of Mossad's Neviot division. The primary challenge was to install a comprehensive signals intelligence suite within a civilian structure without leaving a single compromising trace. The heart of the system was a series of highly directional Yagi and log periodic antennas, custom fabricated to intercept a wide spectrum of frequencies, from low-band HF radio to microwave satellite uplinks. These could not simply be bolted to the roof. Instead, Neviot engineers designed them to be concealed within the resort's very infrastructure. Several of the tallest flagpoles on the property were, in reality, fiberglass radomes containing sophisticated antenna arrays. The large television antenna intended to provide German satellite channels to the guest bungalows was a modified dish, its primary feed horn repurposed to capture PLO satellite phone traffic, while a smaller, secondary feed provided just enough of a legitimate television signal to pass a cursory inspection. The cables from these collection assets were not run in surface conduits but were buried deep underground, co-located with water pipes and electrical wiring installed during the resort's initial construction, their paths documented on falsified architectural blueprints. They terminated in a single, heavily shielded room, designated on the plans as a dry storage pantry but in reality, the operational core of the entire mission. This secret chamber, located behind a reinforced wall at the back of the main lodge's linen closet, was a marvel of miniaturization and operational security. It was constructed as a Faraday cage, its walls, floor, and ceiling lined with a dense copper mesh to prevent any electronic emissions from leaking out and being detected by counter-surveillance sweeps. A dedicated, silenced ventilation system, its outflow cleverly vented through a fake sewage pipe, maintained a constant temperature for the sensitive electronics. Inside, the space was crammed with equipment, racks of RA series radio receivers, banks of magnetic tape recorders for logging raw signal data, and a then-revolutionary computer system, one of the first in the agency to use digital signal processing algorithms to automatically sift through thousands of hours of intercept for specific keywords or voice prints. The most critical piece of hardware was the secure communication link back to Mossad headquarters in Tel Aviv. A small, 12-meter satellite dish was concealed inside the resort's main water tower, its domed roof providing perfect cover. At a specific, pre-arranged time each night, for a brief window of only a few minutes, the dish would orient itself towards a specific Israeli communications satellite, upload the day's intelligence haul in a compressed data burst, and receive any new instructions or updated target frequencies. The power for this entire clandestine apparatus was drawn from the main electrical grid, but it was routed through a series of hidden transformers and filters to mask its significant energy signature from the utility company's meters. The selection of the operatives for Operation Azure was an even more complex process than the technical design. The mission required a team that could maintain deep cover for an unknown number of years, a task that demanded a unique psychological profile. Candidates were not drawn from the ranks of typical field operatives, but were scouted from across Israeli society, sought for their flawless language skills and, crucially, their pre-existing, legend-compatible, backgrounds. The operative chosen to be the resort manager, who would use the alias Dieter Schmidt, was a German-born Israeli named Ari, whose parents had survived the Holocaust. He had grown up speaking native German, possessed a university degree in business administration, and had a calm, authoritative demeanor that inspired confidence. Before the mission, he spent 6 months working in management at a luxury hotel in Tel Aviv, learning every facet of the hospitality industry, from payroll and supply chain logistics to guest relations and emergency procedures. The woman selected to be his deputy and the front desk manager, a Katsa, female field officer, named Yael, was a polyglot who spoke fluent English, German, and French. She underwent intensive training in hotel booking systems, accounting, and, most importantly, the art of deflecting difficult questions from inquisitive guests or local officials. The rest of the team was assembled with similar care. 2 operatives, former Israeli Navy Shayatet 13 commandos, were retrained to become certified potty diving instructors. They spent months at a diving school in Eilat, not only mastering the curriculum they would teach but also learning how to maintain diving compressors, manage equipment inventory, and handle common tourist diving accidents. Their naval combat experience gave them an unparalleled understanding of the maritime environment, a skill that would prove invaluable for the operation's secondary function as a potential seaborne insertion and extraction point for other missions. Another pair of operatives was assigned to maintenance and kitchen duties. One, a gifted electronics technician from a military intelligence unit, took on the role of the resort's handyman, his official duties providing the perfect cover for maintaining the hidden SIGINT equipment. His toolbox contained standard plumbing and electrical tools, but in hidden compartments, it held the specialized diagnostic equipment needed to service the receivers and the secure satellite link. The entire team, numbering just under a dozen, lived together for 3 months in a simulated version of the resort built at a secure Mossad training facility. They cooked together, cleaned together, and ran drills for every conceivable scenario, from a surprise visit by the Cypriot tax authorities to a medical emergency involving a tourist, all while role-playing their cover identities until the fiction became second nature. This intensive period of team building was designed to forge the bonds of a surrogate family, a psychological necessity for a group of people who would be utterly isolated and reliant only on each other for years to come. The final layer of the deception was the creation of the resort's parent company. Mossad's financial and legal wizards, working through cutouts and shell corporations, established a legitimate tourism company in Switzerland. This entity was given a plausible, albeit brief, history, complete with a professionally designed corporate identity, stationery, and a Swiss bank account funded through a labyrinthine series of wire transfers that made the money untraceable to any Israeli government source. This Swiss company, Eurofund Tours, was the official lessee of the Cypriot property. The operatives were provided with impeccable documentation, including Swiss and German passports, driver's licenses, and employment contracts, all expertly forged by Mossad's Documents Division. These were not simple forgeries, they were legends, built on real, but deceased, individuals, meaning a cursory background check would hit a verifiable, but safely terminated, record. The team members studied their assigned biographies until they knew their fictional parents' birthdays and their supposed high school teachers' names. They were conditioned to react to their new names instinctively. This meticulous construction of a corporate and personal backstory was the bedrock of the entire operation. It ensured that from the perspective of the outside world, from the Cypriot government to the German tourist booking a holiday, the Azure Blue Village was exactly what it appeared to be, a modest but well-run business venture, unremarkable in every way. The insertion phase of Operation Azure began in late 1982. An advanced two-person team, led by the operative who would become Dieter Schmidt, arrived in Cyprus. Posing as representatives of the Swiss investment company, they spent several weeks scouting for a suitable location. The criteria were specific. The property had to be coastal and relatively isolated to minimize accidental observation, but not so remote as to seem unnatural for a tourist business. It needed an unobstructed view of the sea to the east, towards Lebanon, and clear sky access for the satellite link. Crucially, it had to be a property that was run down or derelict, providing a plausible reason for extensive, unsupervised construction. They found the perfect site, a failed campground from the 1970s, its bungalows falling into disrepair and its land overgrown. The location was ideal, situated on a small, rocky promontory that offered excellent signal propagation. They negotiated a long-term lease with the local owner, a transaction that was handled entirely through a Cypriot law firm, adding another layer of insulation. Once the papers were signed, the construction phase began, a period that was both a cover for the mission's technical setup and a genuine act of building a functional resort. A small army of local Cypriot contractors was hired to perform the bulk of the renovation, a decision made to embed the project firmly within the local economy and community, making it seem as normal as possible. The Mossad operatives, now in their cover roles, supervised the work. The handyman worked alongside the electricians and plumbers, personally ensuring the secret conduits for the antenna cables were laid correctly. The manager oversaw the budget and timeline, his business-like efficiency impressing the local suppliers. During this 6-month period, the sensitive SIGINT equipment was smuggled onto the island in stages. It was concealed within legitimate shipments of construction materials and hotel supplies. The large, custom antennas arrived inside crates marked plumbing pipes. The delicate racks of receivers and computers were hidden in the base of a large shipment of German-made kitchen ovens. Each piece was discreetly unloaded, often late at night, and moved into position by the core team. The construction of the hidden control room was the most delicate phase. It was built by the operatives themselves, under the guise of creating a secure wine cellar, a slightly eccentric but plausible request for a resort catering to European tastes. They worked in grueling shifts, excavating, soundproofing, and installing the ventilation, all while maintaining the facade of being mere supervisors for the ongoing construction around them. When the Azure Blue Village finally opened its doors to the first tourists, the operation transitioned into its most challenging and sustained phase. The operatives now had to live their dual lives in real time, 24 hours a day. The daily routine was a masterclass in compartmentalization and discipline. By day, they were the perfect hosts. Yael checked in guests at the reception, her smile never faltering. The ex-commandos, now known as Hans and Peter, took novice divers out for their first underwater experiences, their patience and professionalism earning rave reviews in the guest comment book. Dieter, the manager, moved around the property, resolving minor issues, from a faulty air conditioner to a guest's request for a special meal, his presence a constant reassurance of order. The resort was a success. It received excellent feedback, and the Swiss travel company had no trouble keeping it fully booked, ensuring a steady stream of normal activity. This success was vital, as it generated legitimate revenue that was laundered back into the operation's running costs, making it partially self-funding and reducing the traceable financial link to Tel Aviv. At night, the resort's true purpose came to life. The team worked in rotating three-person shifts in the hidden control room. As the last of the guests retired to their bungalows, the handyman would perform a final check of the perimeter, ensuring they were not under any form of surveillance. Then, the operatives for the night shift would slip, one by one, into the linen closet and through the hidden door. Inside the soundproofed Sigint chamber, the atmosphere transformed from relaxed hospitality to intense, silent focus. The operatives, wearing headphones, would methodically scan the designated frequency bands. One would monitor high-frequency radio, listening for the distinctive, rhythmic patterns of Morse code or the squeal of encrypted radioteletype transmissions. Another would focus on the microwave and satellite spectrum, hunting for the faint signals of PLO satellite phones or data links. The third operative managed the recording systems and maintained a real-time log, cross-referencing intercepted call signs and frequencies with a database provided by headquarters. The tension in the room was palpable. They were listening to the unfiltered, operational communications of their most bitter enemies, privy to plans for attacks, movements of personnel, and financial transactions. The work was mentally exhausting, requiring hours of concentration, sifting through static and mundane chatter for the one crucial piece of intelligence. The shift would end just before dawn, the operatives emerging to grab a few hours of sleep before they had to be back on duty, smiling and serving breakfast to their unsuspecting guests. The strain of this dual existence was immense. The operatives were under constant pressure, knowing that a single mistake could have lethal consequences. They had to manage the very real and unpredictable problems of running a hotel. There were medical emergencies, including one instance where a child suffered a severe allergic reaction, and the team had to coordinate an emergency evacuation to a Larnaca hospital, their performance so professional that the grateful parents wrote a letter of commendation to the Swiss parent company. There were surprise inspections by the Cypriot Tourism Board and Fire Department, which the team passed with flying colors, their meticulous adherence to regulations a key part of their cover. The most dangerous moments came from the guests themselves. On one occasion, a German tourist who was an amateur radio enthusiast set up his own small antenna on his bungalow's porch, hoping to contact fellow hobbyists back home. His transmissions created unexpected interference with one of the Mossad sensitive receivers. The team had to engineer a fault in the man's power supply, and the handyman, while fixing it, subtly explained that the resort's proximity to a nearby military communications tower unfortunately made amateur radio operation impossible, a plausible lie that diffused the situation. They lived in a state of perpetual, low-grade paranoia, treating every guest as a potential threat and every mundane problem as a test of their cover. The intelligence payoff from Operation Azure was almost immediate and proved to be of incalculable value. Within the first few months, the listening post had successfully mapped the entirety of the PLO's post-Beirut command and control network. The operatives in the hidden room intercepted and decrypted communications that identified key PLO finance officers in Cyprus, the locations of their safe houses in Limassol and Nicosia, and the schedules of couriers traveling to and from Athens and Damascus. This steady stream of strategic intelligence allowed Mossad to build a comprehensive picture of the enemy's structure, intentions, and capabilities. It was not a single, dramatic breakthrough, but a patient, methodical assembly of a mosaic, piece by painstaking piece. The information gathered at the Azure Blue Village was not used for overt, direct action in Cyprus, which would have compromised the source. Instead, it was used to inform other intelligence operations, to tip off allied intelligence services, and to enable preemptive actions elsewhere in the world. Information about a planned shipment of arms from Libya, intercepted by the listening post, was discreetly passed to the Italian authorities, who fortuitously seized the cargo during a routine customs inspection in Naples. The operation's most significant achievement occurred in 1984. During a late-night shift, an analyst in the control room isolated a series of encrypted telex messages, sent from a public telex office in Larnaca to a known PLO number in Tunis. The encryption was a new, complex cipher, but by cross-referencing it with fragments of previously intercepted communications, the decryption computers back in Tel Aviv, fed by the nightly data burst, managed to break it. The decrypted messages contained the final operational details for a spectacular attack: the bombing of an El Al passenger jet on the tarmac at the airport in Rome. The messages included the flight number, the date of the attack, and the name of the locally hired baggage handler who was to place the bomb. This was intelligence of the highest possible order, a direct threat to civilian lives. The information was immediately relayed to the Mossad station in Rome and to the Italian intelligence service, Digos. The communication did not mention the source but was presented as coming from a sensitive human asset. Days later, Italian police arrested the baggage handler and his PLO contacts, discovering the precisely described explosive device in his possession. The attack was thwarted, and hundreds of lives were saved, a silent, unheralded victory made possible by the patient work of the spies masquerading as hoteliers in Cyprus. After nearly 3 years of continuous, successful operation, the strategic landscape began to shift once again. The PLO, under relentless pressure and with its communications network compromised in ways it could not understand, began to move its central hub away from Cyprus, relying more heavily on more secure locations in North Africa and Iraq. The intelligence yield from the Azure Blue Village, while still useful, began to diminish. A high-level review in Tel Aviv concluded that the operation had achieved its primary objectives and that the risk of maintaining such a complex and expensive deep-cover facility now outweighed the potential rewards. The decision was made to decommission Operation Azure. This process was executed with the same meticulous planning as its creation. The Swiss parent company, Eurofund Tours, announced that due to a strategic business realignment, it was selling its Cypriot asset. A buyer was found, another shell company created by Mossad for the sole purpose of the transaction. The sale was a legal and financial reality, further obscuring the operation's true nature. The extraction of the team and the sensitive equipment was conducted in a phased, gradual process. During the handover period between the old and new management, the operatives began to systematically dismantle the listening post. The satellite dish was disassembled and its components removed, hidden in crates of defective kitchen equipment being returned to the supplier. The receivers and computers were removed from the hidden room, and the room itself was stripped of its copper shielding and soundproofing, its walls replastered to match the rest of in the pantry. The hidden antenna cables were cut and sealed deep underground. The operatives themselves departed one by one. The diving instructors left first, explaining they had accepted better-paying jobs in the Red Sea. The receptionist announced she was returning to France to care for an ailing parent. Finally, Dieter Schmidt, the manager, oversaw the final handover to the new management team, another group of short-term Mossad operatives, before flying to Frankfurt, where his cover identity was officially retired. Within 2 months, every trace of Mossad's presence at the Azure Blue Village had been erased. The resort itself continued to operate under the new management for another year to maintain the illusion of continuity, before it was finally sold to a legitimate Cypriot hospitality group, its secret history buried forever. The consequences and legacy of Operation Azure were profound, both for Israeli intelligence and for the individuals involved. The sheer volume of high-quality, long-term strategic intelligence it produced was unprecedented. It gave Israel a decisive edge during a critical period, crippling the PLO's ability to organize and execute major international terror attacks and providing deep insight into Jejic internal politics, finances, and rivalries. It became a legendary case study within Mossad, a benchmark for long-term, deep-cover operations that fused technological prowess with classic human tradecraft. It demonstrated the value of creating a stable, self-sustaining intelligence platform, an idea that would be replicated in other forms in future operations. The psychological cost to the operatives, however, was immense. For years, they had lived in a state of suspended identity, their every word and action a calculated performance. They had formed a tight-knit, isolated family, their shared secret and mutual dependence creating bonds of an intensity that could not be replicated in the normal world. Their return to Israel was a disorienting process of re-entry, a struggle to shed their cover identities and reconnect with their real lives. They had been phantoms, living in a meticulously constructed reality, and the echoes of that life, the muscle memory of a hotelier, the phantom sound of static in a headphone, remained with them long after the mission was over. The operation raised fundamental questions about the nature of deep cover, weighing the invaluable strategic gains against the profound and often unquantifiable human toll on the agents were asked to sacrifice years of their lives to live a lie. Was the creation of such an elaborate, multi-year deception, blurring the lines between civilian life and espionage, a justifiable act of national security? At what point does the psychological cost to the operatives themselves become too high a price to pay for intelligence, no matter how valuable? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story compelling, please give this video a like and subscribe to our channel.